Well, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to everybody online as well to watch this amazing lady next to me. So I'm sure that there are many fans of The Crown tonight, and some of them you may remember the beautiful, slim, blonde woman who was welcoming Princess Margaret in the scene on Mustique. That was Lady Anne Glenconner, the woman sitting here beside me. But there is so much more to Anne, as you will see when you read the latest of her gripping memoirs. Anne and I are actually old friends because I first learned of her when I went to Mustique in 1980, when I was editor of Tatler, to write a profile of her glamorous and eccentric husband, Colin Tennant, who was always touted as one of Margaret's closest friends. Like everyone who met Colin, I found him wildly beguiling and entertaining, and we became firm friends. It was not until I eventually met Anne in London that I realised she was the most fascinating of the two of them.
Thanks.
So entertaining, such a wonderful observer of all things social and people, and so wise. This woman should write a book, I thought. And I'm happy to say that at the age of 87, she finally did it with her first monster bestseller, Lady in Waiting. I mean, it broke every record. And now, by popular demand, its follow-up, Whatever Next. But it reveals in this book something she touched on in the first, less deeply, but in this book it does reveal some very dark and shocking truths about that apparently very beguiling and charming husband. So welcome, Anne. I'm so pleased that you're with us.
I'm so pleased to be in New York, because I was meant to come 4 years ago.
Yes.
It's really, really thrilling. I was so sad when COVID stopped it all. And I just thought, well, I'll never probably come to New York again. Anyway, here I am.
And here you are. We could not let it go. So here you are. So let's go to one of the most remarkable moments of your life, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, when at the age of 21, you had the incredible honour of being chosen as one of her 6 maids of honour. In this photo behind me, I hope it's there. Is there a photo up?
Yes, right? There I am, in the middle.
You're the second woman on the right. Yes, you're the... yes, there you are. You're the second on the right. Incredible. Tell us about that incredible day.
Well, of course, it was extraordinary. I was actually in America selling my mother. My mother started a pottery at Holkham. I come from a sort of stately home. And she was after the war, and she wanted something for me and my sister to do. She didn't approve of us going to London. Anyway, I wasn't very good at pottery. My sister was very artistic. And my job was something called fettling and sponging. It was the most boring job ever. I suppose I was looking rather grumpy. And my mother said, well, what would you like to do? I said, well, actually, can I go sell? I've always liked selling things. That's why I love my book. I love selling my book. Anyway, I came to America. And I didn't know anybody in America, but I met a very nice lady, and I went all over in a Greyhound bus. I was selling, came back to New York, and I was with a friend, and suddenly the maid, we were having breakfast, the maid came in with a telegram. Well, in those days, people only sent telegrams when somebody died or, something. And I thought, oh, gosh. Anyway, I opened the telegram, and there my mother said, come home, Anne. The Queen has asked you to be a maid of honour. So it was so exciting. And suddenly, I hadn't done all that well selling the pottery, but the New York Times, I think, got wind of it in New York. I remember, and suddenly, wonderful sack. They all rang me up, and I came back with a full order book. I was more excited about that, I think, than being maid of honour. People often say, why were you chosen? It sounds also snobby nowadays, but we had to be daughters of earls, marquises, or dukes. And we had to have sort of nice figures. And the Duke of...
So it was like the Rockettes, actually.
Well, all I can say is there were one or two very, very jealous mothers, other mothers, and one in particular, I won't say who quite, but her daughter was not chosen, and my mother said, well, of course she couldn't be chosen, because this girl walked as if she had a cactus bush between her legs. it wouldn't have been very good,
That's great. I'm glad Twitter wasn't around then, anyway.
But anyway, the 6 of us were chosen, and we were drilled. The Duke of Norfolk is always the Duke of Norfolk who organises the coronation. And this particular Duke of Norfolk, who organised the Queen's, had organised her father before the war, so he did know exactly what to do. And we were drilled like soldiers, And then, of course, we'd been through the war. There was still rationing during at the coronation. And we hadn't got any clothes. We had enough coupons. We either had a pair of shoes or a pair of knickers or something. But never a beautiful dress. And I remember going to Norman Hartnell, and just, it was fantastic. And the silk from our dresses were made from silkworms in Wales, funnily enough. I didn't know what silk, anyway, they came. And the Queen's dress was made of this wonderful silk. And we were all embroidered. Our dresses were sort of embroidered down the back, because he was seen from the back a lot of the time. And
tell us about the moment, you know, when the doors sort of open and it's on. I mean, you've started your processing down the aisle.
My mother and I, yes, when my mother was also, she was a lady in waiting, just been made a lady in waiting to the Queen. So we were the only mother-daughter in the procession. She was walking just behind me, which was like... But she went to Buckingham Palace to have breakfast there, and I and another girl, we went to the Abbey to wait for the Queen. And it was pouring with rain, and people had been there all night, you know. And actually, as we drove along, which was all strange, I could hear somebody say, "Hillary, Hillary." And when I got there, I said, "It's extraordinary." They were shouting, "Oh," they said, "Hillary's reached the summit of Everest." I don't quite know where he'd been all night, but to get there at the top, just at the moment, you know.
Yeah, it was extraordinary.
Anyway, he did, and everybody was simply thrilled. And then we waited for the Queen, and then we suddenly heard her coming with this roar, and it was pouring with rain, and round the corner came this golden coach. It was like a sort of Disney film. Mm-hmm. And then the coach came, we were standing there, 2 pages, opened the door, and there, I suppose we were the first people to see the Queen in her beautiful dress, and she looked ravishing. I mean, you know, she had this beautiful skin and eyes, and wonderful smile. Anyway, we got her out of the coach. The Duke of Edinburgh was slightly fussy. I think he wanted it to be perfect, and although we knew exactly what to do, he kept, anyway, but he sort of left. He realised we knew what to do. The Queen didn't say anything to us at that point. We got her into the Abbey, and the Duke of Norfolk put a little piece of cotton on the carpet so she knew exactly where to stand. She had our back to us, and we had her train flowed over all our hands, and we just waited. And then she just turned round and she said, "Ready, girls?" And off we went. It was like a medieval tapestry. I mean, yeah. The music and all the people from the Commonwealth in their national dress, all the peers in their robes, an awful stink of mothballs because they'd been tucked away during the war. But I mean, how lucky was I?
And afterwards you all sort of convened. I mean, when you came out of there was a great sort of off-stage moment, wasn't there, when you know, it was over and you were able to relax and everyone was laughing.
That was when we got back to, yes, because we waited for her, yes, at Buckingham Palace, and she took off her crown and put it on a table like this. And Prince Charles, who was only about 5, made a beeline for it, got hold of it, and we thought, oh my God, if he drops it, it'd be a bad omen. I think my mother actually took it away. And then the Queen, she sort of skipped down the corridor, and we sort of skipped after her. And she had a film made, a sort of private film made, which I saw, and I noticed that the Queen Mother was looking very happy, and then behind them, Princess Margaret, who looked so sad. And I remember saying to her, "Ma'am, I've just seen this film, and you look so sad." And she said, "Of course I felt miserable. I'd lost my beloved father. I've really lost my sister because she's going to be so busy, and I've got to go and live with my mother." so I do see why she, you know,
yes, oh my God, it's a lot to be sorry about. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, you had known the Queen and Margaret from a very young age. I mean, little girls. I mean, when you were...
Yeah.
And they used to come, they were your playmates. And, I mean, you talked about the Queen being so calm at the coronation. Were the 2 girls, as young girls, sort of as they were later? I mean, was the Queen always the sort of the calm one?
The first time I remember I met Princess Margaret, Princess Elizabeth, Princess Margaret Rose, we called her. I was 3, and I suppose Princess Margaret was about 5, she was 2 years old. And the minute I saw Princess Margaret, I knew she was the right type of friend. We were both quite naughty. But the Queen was very interesting. She always looked after Margaret. She was always looking after and more serious. And Princess Margaret and I, at Holkham, we got a big marble hall. And the one thing we were not allowed to do was to take our tricycles into the hall. Of course we did. I remember Princess Margaret and I racing round on our tricycles, and suddenly down the steps came the Queen. And she said, "What are you doing?" And she's only 9. "You're very, very naughty of you, Anne and Margaret." But she always looked after, and right up to, in fact, when Princess Margaret died, the Queen always, you know.
Do you think the success of her reign was as much about temperament as training? I mean, was it this natural gravitas that was just a piece of luck for the monarchy?
I think so. I mean, there was us 4. The Queen Mother had a lovely childhood. You know, she had lots of brothers and sisters. And her great thing, I think, with the Queen was that they should have fun, and she loved animals. They had corgis, and, you know, they loved ponies. And if you see those old films of them, they're always playing, and, you know. And then I think it was a terrible shock when the Duke of Windsor decided to abdicate, because it really shortened her father's life. I mean, he was the Duke of York then, and my father was an equerry to him during the time of the abdication, which is a very interesting time. And the Duke of York was he had this terrible stutter, so he found it very difficult to communicate with people. And my father, I mean, it was always, the waste paper basket was always being kicked around. My father was always retrieving it, you know. But the great thing was to send for Margaret, because Princess Margaret had this wonderful effect on her father, you know.
That's so touching, and so much.
She always said, you know, he wouldn't have died so young if he hadn't become king.
Yes, I mean, the King George VI, he used to say that Elizabeth is my pride, but Margaret is my joy. My joy.
Yes, I know.
Which is sort of a wonderful thing. So we've got another coronation coming up, of course. I mean, it's incredible. The first one since that one that we remember.
70 years ago.
70 years ago, May the 6th. I understand you've dropped a big hint, Charles, that you would like an invitation.
Well, it's slightly embarrassing. But the thing is that Prince Charles, King Charles, I must call him now, has always been a friend, because my mother was a lady in waiting to the Queen. The Queen had never been to school, and so she had never had any childhood diseases. And so when Prince Charles had them, he was always sent up to my home, and my mother looked after him. And he was there, you know, it's sort of like a younger brother in a way, because I had no brothers. And he always loved coming to Holkham. And I found a wonderful letter that he wrote to my mother the other day and said, "Dear Elizabeth, thank you so much for allowing me to drive your jag and van," because my mother had a van for the pottery. And my father taught him fishing for eels. And I had a talk with him just the other day, and I said, "Do you remember catching eels with my father?" And he said, "Well, I remember that, the most awful thing, and I'll never forget. Your father said, they're delicious to eat. Come down to the kitchen and I'll show you how to cook them." And if you cut eels up, well, they put them in the pan, of course, they immediately jumped out, all the bits, because that's what eels do. And Prince Charles said he absolutely felt he had to eat these awful things that sort of jumping about. But anyway, because I know him very well, and I spent New Year, actually, at Sandringham with them, and I thought, well, I'm 90, I'm just going to go for it. So I said to him, "I'm afraid, so I'm going to be a bit cheeky now." So he said, "Well, really, Anne, what are you going to say?" I said, "Well, the thing is, I'm going to ask to come to your coronation. I really want to come." And so he didn't exactly say yes, but he wrote something down on a pad of paper. So I'm hoping to get my invitation. Because I'll be the only person, funny enough, alive. The two of the maids of honor have died, sadly. 2 are sort of not very well. There's Rosie Churchill was, and me. And there's 1 or 2 pages, and there's a bishop who was a choir boy, I think. But there's nobody else actually, that will have been taking part in one coronation. And I'd very much like to go.
Well, I hope you see to it that he
I don't know.
does.
I'm waiting
and if
for
he's
my
watching tonight,
well, exactly.
get it done,
No,
sir.
exactly. Post the invite.
You're also very good friends, of course, with the now, unbelievably, the Queen, Camilla, the Queen Consort. Did you ever think you would see the day when the former Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles would be crowned Queen?
Well, never. No, never. I mean, I knew her when she was young. You know, she was lovely and very relaxed. You know, she was always smoking away, and her house was not very tidy. You know, I mean, she was just lovely and fun. And I must say, I do feel quite sorry for her in a way, because she wasn't brought up to be queen. I think the royal family, like Princess Anne, was brought up, it's sort of easy because that has always been their life, but it hasn't for Camilla, really. And she's quite, old in a way. I mean, she's young compared to me, but, she... and I think... she's doing a wonderful job.
Well, I mean, she has been sort of flawless in the role from the moment she sort of married Charles.
I mean,
17 years or 18 years.
And she's very interested in books, actually, and started, this book club on television. And and of course, the other thing is domestic abuse, which is brought into the public eye. And that's partly why I wrote this.
Wait, hang on. We haven't got there yet.
I'm getting... Well,
so before we get there, I just want to talk just a bit about Holkham, because you mentioned to people Holkham. I don't know whether people kind of quite realise what Holkham Hall looks like.
I mean, that's my family.
You want to see stately home? Stately home. That is... I mean, I know when I first went there to see it, I was just completely blown away by the grandeur of it. I mean,
the hall is fantastic.
The hall, you walk into this incredibly sort of amazing, sort of austere marble with these kind of swirling sort of marble columns, and this kind of the geese and the huge, lawns. And it's really a very imposing, rather formidable house.
Well, there's the hall.
Yeah. No,
I don't know if any of you saw the Duchess, that film about... it's called The Duchess. That was done there.
Yeah, incredible. So what was it like to grow up in a place like that? And
it was wonderful, great fun. I mean, and it's by the sea too. So, in fact, with the Queen and Princess Margaret used to come, we often went down on the beach where we hopefully dug holes for people to fall in, but I don't think anybody ever did.
What I think is particularly great about your books, Anne, is the way that you so vividly paint the constraints and, the expectations of being born at that time into a, very prominent aristocratic family. And, I mean, there's a great deal of cruelty to those aristocratic norms. I mean, firstly, the fact that your brother then was down to, you didn't have a brother, I realise. No, sorry, not your brother. But there was the rule of primogeniture, which means, of course, that a woman couldn't inherit the Holkham. So you were never going to be able to have that house for yourself.
No, I knew at an early age I wasn't going to. I did mind because my father, in a way, brought me up like a boy. I mean, I used to do a lot with him. I worked in the estate office. I knew everybody on the on the estate, huge estate. I mean, it was 52,000 acres when I was a child. And I did always think it was a bit unfair. And of course, the minute my father died, I mean, my mother had to leave in a fortnight. I mean, out,
That's what I find so cruel. You're literally ejected, aren't you?
Yes, and a hugely rich estate, and the most wonderful things in the house, including we had a Leonardo manuscript and every sort of thing. And all my sisters, I got two sisters, each of us, big disappointment when we were born. And we got one set of china divided into three,
It's incredible. And your cousin got it, right? I mean, you had a cousin.
Yes, he was brought up in South Africa.
Yeah, so he didn't even know the house, really.
No.
Yeah, incredible. So Princess Margaret's fate, of course, was also sealed by primogeniture.
She was a spare.
She was a spare. She was the first spare.
We're going to use that word sometime.
We're going to use a spare. So yes, I was edging there.
I knew he was going to be brought up, so I thought.
So, do you think that she felt? Did she ever feel that she was sort of trapped in a cage herself? That it caused her so much unhappiness, really, unable to marry the man she loved, living as a princess, really without purpose. I mean, Would Margaret have left like Harry if she'd had a different era, lived in a different era?
I mean, the difference between her, because I knew her very, very well, Princess Margaret. I lived with her for a whole year at one point. And, I mean, she always knew she was going to, she was there as a spare. The only time I ever heard her sort of complain about anything was she said, I wish I'd been better educated. Because the Queen was very well educated. She had people from Oxford and Cambridge and Eton. Princess Margaret was left with Crawford and a rather smelly French governess. And I think she would have benefited, Princess Margaret.
I cannot believe that the two daughters would not have been educated the same.
No, they weren't. And although she knew that she was a spare, but I mean, when we're talking about another spare, I mean, Princess Margaret was totally loyal to the Queen. I never heard her say anything, except that she wished she was better educated. And, I mean, she would have done anything for the Queen. And, I mean, in fact, Princess Margaret didn't own a house at all. She just had a grace and favour house. And it wasn't until she came to our island, Mustique, and on our honeymoon. And we gave her, Colin said, ma'am, would you like something in a little box? Or a piece of land, waving his hand rather vaguely. And she said, we gave it to Tony too. And she said, I'd love a piece of land. And it wasn't until our marriage started to go wrong that she rang up and said, have I really got a piece of land? And anyway, he said, yes, you have. Can I come and see it? And I said, well, ma'am, I really don't think you can. We've got no electric light, no water. We are living in a sort of tin box at that point because our house had burnt down. Oh, she said, I'm coming. And she absolutely loved it. And Mustique is not named his name because there are a great many mosquitoes there. And I dressed her in Colin's pyjamas and tied a string around her ankles. And she, funny enough, Princess Margaret was never proud. She didn't mind, funny enough, what she looked like. I mean, she always looked very nice, but she didn't fuss about it because she did look rather strange. And she loved it. And anyway, she built a house. And
well, you were at her side for almost 30 years
yes,
as her lady in waiting. I mean, I think just tell people just a bit what you had to do for her, because, people are not quite sure
what does a lady in waiting?
A lady would do,
Yes, a lady was very strange because I'm a sort of dying breed because Queen Camilla, Queen Consort, is having companions, which are very different. They don't seem to have to do very much. I mean, we used to write a lot of letters. I think being a lady in waiting, she chose us because we were friends. Because if you're going on a big trip, like I did a lot with her, around Canada or Africa or Caribbean, all day she's meeting people she's never met and you endless conversations. And sometimes it can be a bit dull. But so in the evening, if she's with a friend like me, she'd say, come on, Anne, get into our dressing gowns and we'll have a drink and we'll chat about what we did during the day. And that's, was very nice. And you are a go-between. Before, I always had eye contact with her. Even if we went to a lunch or something, I sat where I could see her, and if she needed anything, I could tell. And the great thing at a cocktail party, something like that, I had a list of people that she wanted to see. So I got hold of somebody, and then you had to wait, because if she was having a really fun conversation, one didn't want to barge in with the next person. So one sort of waited, and then when you thought it was the right moment, you brought somebody else in. You find out where the lavatory was so that one could take if she wanted to go. And I always had to stand outside the lavatory to stop anybody else going in. It's like sort of guardsman guarding the lavatory. And then, I knew what she liked to drink, what she liked to eat.
And you sort of ran interference.
Yeah.
Kept the
Yeah. And also, which I did sort of warn one of the companions, because I felt you had to be on the qui-vive the whole time, because although they have tremendous security, but it's not enough the whole time. And I happened to be on Bondi Beach with her, and this man came out of nowhere, grabbed our arm, and so I just did that to him. I think he's quite surprised, actually. And I really enjoyed it, actually. I gave him a bit of biff. And then, the security took him. But you had to, in a way, one was looking after her the whole time and being...
I mean, what I think is very touching in the first book was when you talk about, what she was like. She had this sort of very humble side, where she liked to do things like clean your car, or she liked to style your hair. I mean, she liked to.
She loved something about mine.
One of her presents once to somebody was a lavatory brush, which I thought was interesting.
Well, that was, yes, at Christmas. She had a Christmas tree in the hall, and we had a tea, and then there were all these presents. I mean, sometimes she did give one quite a nice present, or had seen something in an antique shop, and she went. Sometimes it was a bag that she'd obviously had used, and a very nice lady in waiting. She gave a lavatory box, and I could see poor Jean when she opened it, this awful lavatory box. And we then went up to thank her. And I think Jean looked a bit crestfallen. Princess Margaret said, well, aren't you delighted with the box? She said, I came to stay with you the other day, and you didn't have one. Well, of course, you don't leave a lavatory brush when guests come. You sort of hide them. and so I think Tony designed this lavatory brush or something. But when she came to stay with me, she came quite often alone. She used to like to come, always wore her marigold gloves. And quite often she'd say, oh, Anne, do you want me to clean your car? Oh, ma'am, I'd love you to. Are you sure? Yes, I'd love to. And then she on that was okay. But I had a feather duster. She was rather rough with the feather duster. And I thought, I know she's going to knock something over. I think that needs a bit of a clean, she'd say, But she really enjoyed being with me, and just, I sometimes used to have people to stay who knew about architecture or churches, and we used to go around, or we go down to Cambridge, which wasn't very far, and go around the colleges. People found her difficult. They found her, and I felt it was their fault rather than hers, because what people did was she hated surprises, and when she went to stay with somebody, she didn't particularly want to meet the local mayor or the chief of police, and so often people paid off people when they had and she didn't like that. She could be a bit difficult. She liked staying up very late too, also.
Yes, and no one was allowed to go to bed until she had.
That was a slight worry. Yeah.
Well, of course, the entire focus of your girlhood, and any young woman of your age from the echelon of society you were in, the focus was to get you married, right, quickly. And at age 24, you married Lord Glenconner's son, as we know, Colin Tennant. He was brilliant and dazzling, and you became very celebrated for what he did with Mustique, turning it from a wilderness to this playground of the rich. Celebrated for his parties that he hosted with the likes of Mick Jagger. But you sort of learned almost immediately that Colin was capable of astonishing cruelty, really, right? I mean, it began on your honeymoon.
It did. Well, it was a honeymoon story. Yes. The thing about Colin, people say, why did you marry? Well, my father, you see, the sort of families I came from, the point was that you were trained, which I went to a special finishing school, to know how to look after a stately home like Holkham. And the thing was, you married and then immediately, hopefully, produced an heir. My father, in fact, wanted me to marry Lord Stair, who was a friend of his. I mean, he's my father's age. Frightfully disappointed when I said, well, look, Dad, I honestly got no spite. I don't want to marry somebody as old as you. Oh, well, that's very inconvenient of you to say that. What about his brother? So I then had to go out with his brother.
You had a huge walkout with the father of
Well,
Diana
I was
Spencer.
engaged to Diana's father.
Yes, Earl Spencer was
that was difficult because his father, Jack Spencer, my grandmother was a Trefusis, and Trefusis is meant to have bad blood, so that came to an end. but you were brought up. That was what you were brought up to do,
So, I mean, tell us about the honeymoon.
Well, Colin was very exciting. I mean, he was quite different. My father was horrified when I wanted to get married. I remember chasing my father all around the house to tell him I was actually engaged to Colin. And Colin was magical. I saw that he had rather a bad temper, but he always said to me, the minute we're married, it's going to be fine. I just won't lose my temper ever again. Of course, I believed him. Anyway, we set off. My wedding was extraordinary. I mean, my father treated me like a boy. I had 3 wedding cakes. There was one huge tent for all the workers at Holkham. There was another tent for the tenant farmers. And then our friends were actually in the house. And off we set. We arrived in Paris very late. I came to the Lottie Hotel in Paris. And went up, we thought, to the honeymoon suite. Well, when we got up there were 2 single beds. Colin completely lost it, raced down where there was a terribly frightened little man behind the counter, and said, it was quite, impossible to have 2 single beds. So the old man said, well, the only thing is there's a double mattress in the basement, and if you'll help me, we'll heave it up to the top. Well, everybody in the hotel woke up and opened the door. This mattress was heaved up. Everybody looking at the man. They threw it on the bed, and Colin lay down on the bed and went to sleep. And that was. And I'm standing there in my silk dress and holding my bag, and I'm all this. I think I have my hat on. And I thought, well, my God, this is so disappointing. It is.
There was the visit,
anyway,
terrible visit.
The next day we went round the Louvre. I think we started looking at various things. And then he said, I've got a treat, a surprise for you. And I thought, well, obviously, it's going to be dinner at the Ritz. So I got dressed up, and we got into the taxi. And I thought it was a bit strange. I sort of vaguely knew where the Ritz was. And we went on, and I said, where are we going? And Colin said, don't worry, it's going to be a surprise. Eventually, we ended up with frightfully seedy. It was a brothel, in fact. Hotel, and I remember going up, and there were 2 wing-back chairs, velvet wing-back chairs. Thank God they were wing-backs. I sat like this, and on the bed in front of us, 2 of the most disgusting French writhing about, making love on the bed, and then every now and again they said, "Oh, would you like to join in?" And I being very polite, I said, "It was very kind of you, but no, thank you." And I didn't dare look and see what Colin was doing. And then, thank goodness, they then got off. And I said to Colin, it was a horrible thing. Why did you think? Oh, he said, I thought it was, excite you or something. So, and that was the beginning of the honeymoon.
Well, it's very bad omen. But then, of course, he did get physically violent. And in your first book, you do touch on this. But in your new book, you've really gone much deeper into that. And I was really shocked because knowing Colin for years as I did, I had absolutely no idea that he could behave in this sort of, frankly, monstrous way, because he had these sort of excitable tantrums and it thought it was funny and it was eccentric, but it actually got much worse than that, didn't it? And he was berating people, he was physically violent, and in this book you have this terrifying scene where he actually physically attacked you in Mystique.
Yes.
About that, when he really...
But you see, before, earlier on, when I first met her, I was pregnant with our first son. I thought I can't cope, because he actually had, poor thing, 2 nervous breakdowns before I married him. And, I just didn't... I went back to my mother and said, I don't think I can marry. And she said quite rightly, you go straight back. You married him, you go straight back. And we were brought up in those days. I wouldn't recommend, I wrote this book that you may all read, I don't know. I felt I had made it sort of more amusing in my first book. I covered it up slightly. I didn't write about it in the way perhaps I wanted to. And I suddenly thought, well, I'm 90 now. The Queen Consort has brought domestic abuse into the public eye very much. And what was the best thing of all was I had a really wonderful talk with my children, my 3 children, and I said, do you mind if I write about Dad? I said, we all loved him, but he did behave in a monstrous way. And the children then told me things that I hadn't realized that had happened. Rather horrifying sometimes thing. And we talked about it, and because of that, we all got on. It's been so lovely, actually, since I read this book. And
tell us about that scene in Mystique, though, because it was the scene in Mystique when
yes. The worst. Yes, it was I've got twin daughters, and it was their birthday, And we went down to Basil's Bar, which is a famous bar at Mustique. And Colin had some people he was selling land to. And he said, would I go out? And I said, well, yes, I'll come and say hello, but I want to go back because it's the girl's birthday, you know. And I did go and say hello, and then I went back to be with the girls, and he suddenly came. I thought he looked, and he said, come with me. And I didn't make a fuss. I just didn't, because I didn't want the girls to be frightened, you know. And it was something that it wasn't instant. It was thought out, and he drove me back to our house where he had this shark skin stick, and I thought he was going to kill me. Anyway,
he beat you with the stick.
Yeah, I mean, yes, all over. And I then managed to get into my bedroom. I locked the door, and I waited there. And in the morning, I crawled out I had this wonderful nanny called Barbara Barnes, who then went on to look after Prince William and Prince Harry, and she got the doctor. And you know, I obviously couldn't go out for about a week. But Colin, after having he could have killed me. He could have thought I was dead. He went back and he said to somebody, this is what men, he said to somebody working, I won't say who it is, out Mustique, and said, I've just thrashed down. And he did nothing, the man. He could have gone up to my Barbara, the nanny, and said, look, I think Lady Anne might need you. Did nothing.
You know, the thing that that obviously one asks is, you were anything but a doormat. Obviously, you're the, very strong woman. Why did you stay with him?
I stayed with him because we were brought up to do that. I mean, my mother said life isn't fair, but you just get on with it. I mean, after that, I did go back. My mother knew about it, and she said, we had a meeting with Colin, and she said, if you ever do that to Anne again, she must leave you and come here. But people, I mean, since my book, which one of those humbling things about having written these books are the letters I get. I'm a gay icon because of writing about my darling son Henry, who died of AIDS.
Yes.
Well, we get but and since this book, I've had the most extraordinary letters from people. I mean, very sad letters, because so many people are ashamed of domestic abuse. They don't want to. They don't want to. They feel it's too difficult to bring it out. And because the Queen Consort has done this amazing job, of speaking about it, it's been on television. She gave this United Nations party at Buckingham Palace for domestic abuse.
She's really made it her cause in a way.
And the letters I've got, which is so encouraging, is saying thank you for writing your book. There's at the back, probably not here, but in the English edition, there's some charities that help people who are suffering domestic abuse.
And actually, Colin had a final act of sadism, which
that
was just the worst. I mean, he left his entire estate to his longtime valet, right?
He died. I looked after him. He had cancer at the end, Colin, and I looked after him all the time. Came back to England just to see, because my mother's Christopher, my third son, had this awful accident and was very disabled. And he died when I was away. And when I came back, we had this extraordinary funeral, and I had rung up his and said, because out there, the will has to be read the night of the funeral. And the lawyers he'd had said, I think Lord Glenconner has changed his will. My heart sank. And he had. And I always remember standing there, and this rather seedy lawyer came up with one bit of paper, and it just said, I leave everything to Kent Adoney. This was his valet, the man who looked after him. I trust you'll carry out my wishes towards the family. So when I said to Kent, I do hope you'll carry out Lord Glenconner's wishes, he said, I don't know what you mean. Colin had left everything to him. He was illiterate, he couldn't read and write.
Unbelievable.
And he didn't mention me or the children. And that was the final blow. I mean, that's why I wrote my books, really. I don't think I didn't have, very little to live off.
It's really horrendous. And, and also, given, which we haven't spoken about and we've touched on here, but, your three wonderful sons. I mean, Charlie, who became a heroin addict, and sadly he died at age 39. Your son Christopher was in a near-fatal motorcycle accident. Your son Henry died of AIDS.
He's 29.
Yeah, at 29.
And it all happened at the same...
And it all happened, and you nursed, really, Christopher through it in the most incredible way.
I wasn't going to lose him. His wife is here.
I know, and his life has now totally turned around, and he's got the wonderful Joanna who's with us here.
I knew the other two boys were going to die. And when Christopher was there, I have it's not, I don't know in America, but in England, people don't talk about their faith very often. You know, people get embarrassed when you say, but I did have a faith. And I had a very stern talk with God. I said, I know you're taking two of my sons. You're not taking Christopher. And the doctor said he was going to be a vegetable. I mean, he was not, you know. And
it was a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, I was told by this specialist, old lady Glenconner, if I were you, I should go home and forget him because he's going to be a vegetable all his life. And I came out fighting. I just wasn't going to. And we did all sorts of things. My nanny, Barbara, who was looking after Prince William and Harry, had left her job. She was with them 5 years. And she rang up and she said, Lady Anne, I'll give you a year. I'll come and help look after Christopher for a year. And we did all sorts of things he couldn't swallow at all. And the doctor said, you know, if he can't swallow, the outlook's not so good. And Barbara one day bought a baby's bottle to the hospital. And the nurse said, what are you doing with it? She said, can I try it? Because he was her first baby, the first baby she looked after. And she put the teat between his lips and so did this. And it was automatic, and he suddenly swallowed. And we wrote, in fact, an article for The Lancet about how, as lay people, we felt that people in comas could be helped. And I got together a coma kit, because so often I noticed that the families didn't know what to do when somebody's in a coma. They sit round, sort of, and this enables people to help do something. It stimulates the five senses. We have to do a quarter of an hour in every hour. And I nursed him on the floor too, so that I could have him. I sat behind him, so I could get him up here, so he could feel my heart. And it was actually like giving birth to him all over again. It was absolutely extraordinary. And I helped other people. There was an Arab young man, prince, and he'd had a fall out playing polo, and he was in the London clinic. And I got a message from him saying, would I go and see him? Well, when I got to there were all his entourage, they were all in the corridors. Got into the room, and there was his mother, sister, in the back, gloves. And very bravely, I went up to his mother and I said, do you mind? I'm going to take off your thing, take off your gloves, sit there and hold him. Stroke his hand, talk to him, and actually I got to do it. And what was fantastic, that he came out of his coma. I don't know, it's kind of me particularly, but I got them to interact with him, which you should do,
It's really amazing. I mean, we have to now go to questions, but I mean, you've had such an extraordinary life. I mean, these amazing highs with the coronation and the times with Princess Margaret, and then this absolute terrible tragedy of your sons, and dealing with Colin's really ugly behaviour all the way through. I mean, it's remarkable to see.
If you go through that, you either don't come out.
I mean,
I came out much stronger. Oh. Those are things either make you much stronger, and I enjoy life. I've never had such a good time ever. I just
do you feel that
wonderful
how the books have they really been writing the books? Were they a very freeing experience?
Very cathartic. I mean, really helped, especially, but very much so. And I have got very good recall, which I didn't know I had, until I started. I dictated. I mean, I said age 87, I can't actually write. I mean, I don't even have a mobile. I mean, I have a mobile in the car, but I don't. If you want to get in touch, it's postcards or landline. Luckily, I've got lovely Joanna here who does all that sort of thing for me.
Well, here's a question from the audience. Do you think Charles is happy being king?
very happy. Do you know, I've never seen, he's absolutely beaming. He's waited a long time, and he's really happy. I was amazed. Actually, when I first saw him, we always hug, and I said, "Congratulations!" you know? And he said, "Yes." He said, "Oh no, he's having a lovely time. He's really enjoying it."
I must say that when he opened Parliament, when the Queen was still alive in her last days, and there was a big cushion, you know, with the crown on it, and he was sort of looking at it, shall we say, a little bit longingly. If the thought bubble would have been, when?
Yeah, when, exactly. Yeah, he did have to wait a long time.
He did. And now, of course...
I think he'd be a marvellous king, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so sympathetic to people. And actually, if you probably don't get pictures here, but on our paper, there are always a lot of pictures. And he's always going around, he's visiting everybody at the moment. And he's beaming, and they're giving him flowers, and you can see him interacting with people. And of course, he's got Camilla. You know, he's so happy with her.
You knew, well, here's another one. You knew Harry and William as young boys. What were they like when they were young boys? And did you sense that Harry was an happy
child? I bathed them both, actually, when they were very small. Because my nanny went to them, and so May and the twins Diana was very sweet, actually, and said, "Oh, they must come and help look after, you know, and bath." Then, Barbara adored Prince William, who was very... Harry, I think, was a bit more difficult.
And you mentioned something she said about Harry.
He was born angry.
Yes, Barbara Barnes said he was born...
Well, then that better not...
All right, okay. Sorry about that.
You made me say that.
All right, I made you say that. Here's an interesting question. Knowing what you know about being close to the royals, if you could be queen, would you be?
Would I be queen?
Yes. Knowing the job up close, you've seen it, you know what it's like.
Well, I think probably not. I mean, I think if you're born into it, like the Queen or Princess Anne, I've got great admiration for Princess Anne. I thought during the funeral and everything, she was wonderful. I think if you're born into it, but I think if you come into it like Camilla, no, I think it's jolly hard work, and it's very boring a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, you have to sit with a lot of people.
You know, you meet all these people. I mean, the Queen, I know you're not allowed to say where do you come from nowadays, but the Queen was very, very clever, because she always said, "How far have you come?" Which was so clever of her. That was her usual thing. "Oh, do tell me, how far have you come?"
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody who tries to marry into the royal family, it is very difficult, isn't it?
I think Kate has been wonderful. I think she's a wonderful wife and mother, and so perfect, and she looks divine too.
And you know her mother, Carol, don't you?
I knew them all, because they used to come to Mustique, and that's where Prince William sort of courted, I suppose, Kate. Yeah, and I think they were both very well brought up. She was a Mrs. Bennett.
Yeah.
But
yes. Yes, but she did a very good job with those girls. There's no doubt about that. Here's one. What myth or rumour do you wish would be dispelled about the monarchy?
About who?
About what myth or rumour would you like to see dispelled? What has everybody got wrong about the monarchy's meaning to the British people?
Well, I suppose we must. People always say about the Crown, which is absolute right. I was in it. I only watched it when I was in it. But I mean, I just think it's very difficult, actually, because I'm sure I've always been told that people in America think it's absolutely gospel. I mean, it's hardly, there's a grain of truth in it. And I don't know why. When it started, it was rather good. I don't know whether you saw. And we all thought, well, this is going to be rather good. And then he went completely off-piece, that man who writes it. And I think the actual story of the royal family is fascinating. I don't know why they have to make up all these
So what
things.
did you think they got most wrong in The Crown?
Well, I think the Duke of Edinburgh was appallingly... I thought Claire Foy was brilliant as a queen. I thought she was the best queen. I didn't like Coleman. What was she doing?
Olivia Coleman, yeah.
Well, she knew she wasn't very good either. She said to me, "I'm not really the right person." Well, apart from anything, one of the sort of tiny things about her is she shares a lot of gum when she smiles, Olivia. And the Queen, of course, didn't. And so Olivia was told not to smile. Well, one of the points of the Queen was to have a ravishing smile, so lit up the room. I think that, and also I minded very much about Princess Margaret because she was always the bad, so the Queen was a good sister. And Princess Margaret, who did smoke and loved to drink and liked staying up late, was absolutely perfect for the media. So they immediately said she's a bad sister. And I think that was very unfair, actually, because, she wasn't...
Do you think if Margaret had been had been the number one in the line of succession?
Well, I think she would have actually been quite a good queen. She would have completely changed, because if you're born into something, if she knew she was going to be queen, I think she would have been quite fun, actually. Perhaps more adventurous than the Queen. But she's very intelligent, Princess Margaret, very well read and all that, which the Queen loved her horses and her dogs, but I imagine...
No, Margaret loved arts and culture.
Yes, exactly, music
did.
and all that.
If you had to do it again, would you? If you had to do your life over, would you?
My life?
Yes.
Well...
What would you do different?
Well, I must say that when the boys... I don't think I could do that again. I did it because you have to do it, you don't know what's going to happen in life. And the book, I called it this book, Whatever Next, but really about how my life changed tremendously. I mean, last summer, perhaps it wouldn't mean so much to you, but I was asked to speak at the Oxford Union, which is really tough. You've probably spoken, have you?
I'm far too frightened to speak there.
Well, it is frightening, because you never know. Gordon came with me to ride shotgun to New Gordon. But actually, it was fine, and they were okay. And then I did that one day. Again, the end of the week, I was asked to give a cup away at Ladies' Day at Ascot. And I gave the cup away at King George, and that was fantastic. I went with my daughter. And as we were going to go down to give the cup, I was told by but you also got to choose the best turned out horse. Well, man, I know nothing about horses at all. And so we had to look, and we pointed at one that had sort of plaits on it. And then Princess Anne, because the Queen couldn't go because she was too ill. And Princess Anne was doing the sort of sitting in the royal, and she came down after I'd given the cup away to talk to me and May. And I said, we didn't quite know which horse to choose. We chose that one with the mane. So she said, well, I hope I had a really good look at its mane, because if it was done with rubber bands, you shouldn't have chosen it. So I said, well, we're far too frightened to get anywhere near it. But all those, I mean, it was so wonderful at my age to be asked to do all these things.
Do you think that Colin would be very jealous of your success?
Colin, I think he might be too bit proud, but no, he'd be frightfully jealous. So tiresome of you to write your book, because I was about to do mine.
Okay, well, here's this one last question, which is about Princess Margaret. Your most favourite moment with Princess Margaret that made you both laugh out loud?
Oh, well, when we went to Australia, that was the first time I went with her, and we stayed with Lord and with Sir Ronan Cutler, who at VC. It was far grander than the Queen. I mean, and I wasn't allowed to go down the front stairs. I had to use it. I could only go down the front stairs if I was with Princess Margaret. Anyway, Lady Cutler was also always in a sort of uniform. I'm not quite sure why, with sort of medals here the whole time. And anyway, she said to him, would I come into her sitting room? So I said, yes. She said, do you think Princess Margaret would receive a present? I've got a present. So I said, well, I'm sure she'd absolutely love a present. So I said, what is it? Well, she said, we want to give her a boomerang cover. So I went back to Princess Margaret and I said, you'll never guess what they're going to give you. They're going to give you a boomerang cover. So Princess Margaret said, well, how big do they know my boomerang is? But of course, and we laughed. I mean, we screamed with laughter. And I said, "But where is your boomerang?" Everybody said, and of course, I mean, we laughed so much. And then, of course, what it was a quilt that had been all the different women's institutes. They went out to one end and then came back to Sydney and went out again. That's why it's got a boomerang cover. And then the other thing, it's all happened in Australia. We went, there was races at Melbourne, I think, and she got her shoes wet. It was very, very wet. And at lunch, she took them off. She said, "Look, Anne, can you take them into the cloakroom, ask the lady in the cloakroom to dry them for me?" Because I was shaking. So I went and said, "Well, you know, these Princess Margaret shoes, so you dry them." And so after lunch, I went in. I said, "Could you give me Princess Margaret's shoes?" Well, I didn't recognise them. I said, "What have you done to them?" And she said, "I put them in the microwave." And so I went, Princess Margaret was simply furious. She thought it was my fault. She hobbled about, looking absolutely furious. But I mean, we did have fun. And I often, you see, being a lady in waiting, she said she wouldn't go on to Bondi Beach because I hate sanding my shoes, Anne. And they came to me and said, "Do you think you could persuade us?" So I said, "Well, I'll try. So I actually went up to see our maid, and I said, "Can I have a flat pair of shoes?" Put them in my bag. On the way to Bondi Beach, I said, "Ma'am, you wouldn't change your mind, because to go on to Bondi Beach is rather like kissing the Blarney Stone." No, I couldn't possibly. So I thought, "Well, look, ma'am, I have got this flat pair of shoes." And being, it was so nice of her, she just looked at me and said, "Okay, Anne, you win this time." We had that sort of relationship.
Trust.
So I could actually get her, I didn't succeed every time, but I could get her to do quite a lot of things.
Well, I think you get quite a lot of people to do a lot of things because they all absolutely adore you, Anne. And I think we've been so lucky today to have Anne with us to sort of share just a morsel of her amazing life, which is all in this marvellous book. The latest one is signed, Whatever Next, and it's available for purchase outside. So thank you so much, Anne.